We're going to continue in our series this week in 1 John. And I have a message that I'm really excited to preach today. This has been one that's been helpful for me as I've tried to live this better over the last couple weeks. And I hope it'll be helpful for you too. So we'll pull the verse up here, 1 John chapter 2, 15 and through 17 here says this: don't love this world, nor the things it offers. Say, things it offers. For when you love the world, you do not have the love of the Father in you. For the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and pride in our achievements and possessions. These are not from the Father, but are from this world. And this world is fading away, along with everything that people crave. But anyone who does what pleases God will live forever. Say, live forever. Live forever. God, we love you so much. We thank you that you've made a way that we can live forever. We thank you that your word is true, that your presence is with us, that your spirit is speaking. And we thank you that you're very pleased with this. We thank you that we can even come together and to see and to know you. God, we ask that even today you would help us to look more like you. In your name, amen. 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 Y'all can have a seat. Have a seat. Today I want to talk to you about the subject about how to create the future. How to create the future. It's going to be fun. We, as human beings, one of the things that we have, I'm going to move this back a little bit. I feel like I'm got you guys cut off over here. Cap was on. As human beings, we have this super interesting capacity to think about the future and then kind of create it, even live in that direction, if that makes sense. We'd be the only sort of future planning animal, if you like, we're the only one of God's creation that would have the ability to know that in 40 years I'm going to be doing something, and depending on what I do today, it might get better or it might be worse than where I'm at, and it might be where I want to go or where I don't want to go. So I just, think about like a lion out there worried about his IRA, right? He's not connected that way to his future. I just pictured this like lion with this like business suit on, walking out. He's like, business line, yeah. That line means business. None of this is in my notes, whatever. So, but we have the super capacity to build our future and to think about the future. And man, I'm so excited about the future of our city and the future of our church, because I believe God has a dream for our city. I believe God has a dream for our church. I believe there's a future in mind. God says in the book of Isaiah, Jeremiah, he says, I have a future for you. I know the plans I have for you. God has plans, and they are to give us a future and a hope. God has that for our city, has it for our church, and he has that for you individually. So today we're going to talk about how we can create the future. Should be good. So I have a spoiler alert. If you haven't seen Infinity War, it's almost been out for 3 months. So I'm not going to do any like major spoiling, but I feel like 3 months is probably not enough time to like just sell everything. So I'm only going to share the part that is very important to our message. I love these movies. I know that some people are kind of like over it, whatever. I am all in. I think this is the coolest thing. I just love all of it. Thor is my favorite, probably because I think I look like him a little. Whatever. So in this newest installment, something bad is going to happen, and Doctor Strange, who's played by Benedict Cumberbatch, who's one of my favorites. He sits there and he kind of like goes off by himself while everybody's trying to like figure out these problems, and he's doing this weird like meditation thing. It's not Christian, whatever. And he comes back and he's like, I just looked at 15 million different futures of like how this can pass, how this can like go on. And I was thinking about this, and I was like, oh my gosh. Can you imagine the anxiety that he has to live with knowing what's going to happen in 15 million different futures? I'm like, oh my goodness. And I was like, oh, that literally is us. We live our lives this way. Before we have an interaction, we think about, it might go this way. Oh, but it might go this way. And if it goes that way, then I'm going to say this thing. And then if it goes that way, I might say this thing. And then, or if I just don't ever have it, then maybe in a week we'll be able to do that. And then so we end up with all of these futures played out for this little small part of our life. But then we do it for another part, and another part, and another part, and another part. Now no longer are we not only living in the present, we're living in 15 million futures. The anxiety, the stress of trying to manage all of these conversations and relationships that haven't even happened yet. And only one of them will ever come to pass. So only 1/15,000,000th of the futures that stress us out are ever coming our way. And I was just like, I was blowing my mind thinking about all this. He's got this, I'm just, oh my goodness, 15 million futures, so many futures. We could take this job or take that job. We could ask him on a date, or we could wait till he asks us on a date, or we could just never do that, or we could ask her to marry us, or we're not really sure. We could maybe not. Just think about like all of the things, like big decisions coming at us all the time, creating our future. And it's enough to give us at least a low level, kind of constant anxiety. And I love the book of 1 John. I love John generally. He takes very, very complex things and he dumbs them down to like very simple terms. So if you'll remember, we talked about, at the very, very beginning, we talked about how God is light and in him there is no darkness. And so we learned that like there is light and there is dark. And if you break this down, we start to think about it maybe a little too much. We say that, well, it seems like some things are a little light and a little dark. It seems like there's, like in John just says, forget all of that. He says God is light, and in him there is no darkness. He takes all of these things that are often convoluted, very gray, and he makes them black and white. Says things like, if you love God, you're in this camp, then you'll do what he says. If not, then you're in this camp, A or B. Which for someone like me is very helpful. Imagine if John brought all of the complexity of a relationship with God to a book that we're supposed to memorize and remember and all of this. Just think about like all of the areas of our walk with God that just have to be, we just have to, in relationship, work through some of those things. And can you imagine him trying to bring that relationship to the pages of the scriptures? I'm just very happy that John breaks things down in black and white. And he gives us, in doing that, he gives us a bit of a North Star in the way that we should land and think. And when we're processing through our lives with God, we have a way and a North Star, something to end up with. So if our processing with God ends up anywhere, but God is light, and in him there's no darkness at all, we know we can reorient. Because sometimes it feels like in our walk with God that it's dark. Like there's times where he's quiet or he's far away and we're like, my goodness, this feels like there's darkness in my life. God, we can be reminded that no, God is light. In him there's no darkness at all. And so as we talk about our futures, and so many futures, and some of these choices have to do with where we'll be going, what we'll be doing. And most of these choices end up being about who we are. Should I sleep with him or wait till we're married? This is a big decision. It has a lot of ramifications. Should we move in together before we get married? Should I go out with drinks, though I know probably I'll get a little bit way more intoxicated than I planned on? These are real decisions, and they have like real consequences for our future. And we think about our future in these really big decisions. I remember the moment that we decided to plant a church in Virginia Beach. And it wasn't the moment we decided out loud, but it was the moment we both decided in our hearts. And so we'd been planning and praying about coming here, moving from Wisconsin to plant this church. And we flew down here. Christina had about a half of a day she could get off of work for the rest of the year. And so this was in October. We'd taken some other vacations and things early that year. And we weren't planning on doing all of this in this timing, but it was just something we couldn't shake, so we're like, we just have to go. So she got off work at noon, went to the airport. We got in here sometime around midnight, 1 a.m. Went to sleep a little bit. We kind of sleep deprived. We'd just been traveling. It's time to drive and see the city through the window of a car, really. So we basically just drove around Virginia Beach till Sunday afternoon. So we were here for about 36 hours, and decided that we're going to decide to give our lives to this place. We're not planning on leaving. And so we're like, this is a very heavy, a lot of weight going into making this decision. I'm like, man, if we do one thing, if we decide to move here and plant this church, our life for generations looks very, very different. Leah would have grown up in Wisconsin, loving cows and cheese and beer, and it's totally true. All Wisconsinites. But he's going to grow up here, hopefully surfing and doing the Virginia Beach thing. And it's just that decision, it just changes not only for his life, but for our lives. Now we're farther away from our family, and we have to start a church, and there's a lot of thinking going on. And so we're trying to make this decision all in this 36 hours, and it got so overwhelming for us, so overwhelming. And so I remember sitting in, we were in a parking lot of a store, and we just parked the car there, and I looked at her, and I was just like, how could we ever make this decision? And we both we're both a little bit crying, just so many emotions, thoughts, living in so many futures all at once. And we were like, I don't know. So we just prayed for a little while, kept driving around the city, went out to eat. And we just said, I looked at Christina, and I was like, man, we just need to know, it doesn't matter if we like this city, if this is the place we want to give our lives. So we just kind of decided that we don't have to see the city through the lens of, does Caleb like it, does Christina like it, whatever. We just have to say, is this where God is calling us? And that made it a lot simpler. All of a sudden, I wasn't trying to live in the future, I was trying to live in the present. And I remember getting on the plane to leave. We went to church Sunday morning at a friend's church, and we got on a plane, and as we were leaving, Christina said this. She said, I feel like we're leaving home. And I think in that moment, both of us in our hearts were like, yes, we're going to do this. It took us another 3 months to admit it to ourselves, but we knew. And so you could say in that moment, our lives were changed. And that's how we talk about it, because we like to talk about our lives in this really romantic way. This one moment held all unlimited futures, and we decided and we picked one in this one singular moment on a plane. But that's not how futures are built. We had up until that moment, we had driven around the city for 36 hours. We'd looked at the Wikipedia page for Virginia Beach about 70 billion times. I'd called pastors in town. We had done church planting training. We'd wanted to plant a church for, how long would it be? 6 years at that point. So we'd done all the reading and watching the talks on YouTube and dreaming about doing this and making decisions. So we didn't make a decision in that moment. It became apparent that this was just one more decision all along the road. I'd say big landmark, watershed moment decisions in our lives aren't that big thing as much as they're just signposts along the path that we've already been walking on. So futures aren't built in a moment. Think about it. If you're married, you didn't decide to say yes when he got down on a knee. You thought about that every moment. When he would text you right after work, or decide not to play video games and come to hang out with you instead. And when you would decide, all of those little moments that you decided, you're on a date and he does something. If anybody else did it, you'd think it was so stupid, but you thought it was a little cute. So that's something. And you think about, so you get to that moment, and it's not a decision as much as it's acknowledging where on the road you are. Because you made little decisions all along the way. Which emoji to use? Is this a winky face or a smiley face? See, when I was dating Christina, we just had the colon and the paren on the one side. I believe one paren is called the paren. One is a paren, two is parentheses. I believe that's true. At least that was my math teacher. Parentheses are part of math. It's the order of operations. We're in high school. I might just teach. Guy who took math for life in college is how to balance a checkbook. Still don't know how. Okay. So in all these moments and these important things, these big decisions that we're making, they're not big decisions that we make in a vacuum. We make choices every single day to walk down the road. And your life is a reflection of this. Our marriages aren't a reflection of the vows we took when we got married. That's the North Star. Our marriages are a reflection of the way I treated my wife when Leo got up this morning and I pretended to be sleeping. That's only happened once today. It's when there's a big pile of dishes and you said, I promise to serve you. And you decide whether or not those vows become the reality of your marriage or if they become the history of your marriage. Yeah. Will the vows you took be the future or your history? And it's the same thing about in our marriages as it is with ourselves. We build ourselves every day, the way we think. Your future is out there, but it's built today. We are architects of our future, but not in these big, grand ways. We need to see something on the horizon to walk towards, and every single day we're either walking towards it or walking against it. Our choices are building our future. Our choices are building our future. I want to just take a moment and just caveat this a little bit. There's some things in our lives, some things that are outside of our control. You got fired from a job. She broke up with you. Some abuse. There's some things in our lives that are outside of our control. And I want to say that, man, my heart is with you in those things. Absolutely with you in those things. Jesus gives us this power to continue towards the future he has for us. Part of what it means to be redeemed is to be bought back. When somebody abuses you emotionally, physically, sexually, it takes something for you, but Jesus has redeemed it. He's bought it back. Your future belongs to him. And so when we talk about building our futures, and we stand there and we look at sometimes it feels like our entire present is just a mess. How could we ever get moving forward? Jesus comes in and he picks up the pieces. He doesn't say he gives us a better version of our old life. He says he gives us a brand new one. He bought us back from the power of sin. My sin and the sin committed against me. Your future is bright because of Jesus. I want to show you why. In Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19, and 20, Moses is getting to the end of his life. And so Moses is this guy who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. This is the 5th. And he's getting to the end of his life. And Deuteronomy, if you break down the word, it just means like second law. So he gave the law at the beginning of their time in the wilderness. Now they're at the end of their time in the wilderness, and he's giving them the law another time. So it's a restatement, and it's this sort of moment where he's coming before Israel and saying, what has been true here will be true forever. And so I want you today, and so God says this, he says, today, as he did 40 years before, and as he is some thousands of years later, today, he says, today, I've given you the choice between life and death, between blessings and curses. And he says, and God is saying this, he says, now I call on heaven and earth to witness the choice you make. Oh, that you would choose life. Oh, that you would choose life. This groaning from God. Oh, please, would you choose life so that your descendants might live? In verse 20, you can make this choice how? By loving the Lord your God, obeying him, and committing yourself firmly to him. This is the key to your life. If you love and obey the Lord, you will live long in the land the Lord swore to give your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God makes out of 15 million possible futures, the anxiety of 15 million possible futures, all of these things, he sets it down to this in this moment. He says, I've given you life and death. I've put before you life and death. You can choose life or you can choose death. He says all you have to do to choose life, and he gives this huge long law, and then he sums it up in this moment. He says it's this easy. All you have to do is love God. Just love God. Stay close to him. That leads to life, leads to blessing. And I just want to reiterate this. The future that God has for you is one of hope, one of blessing. He wants your life to thrive. He wants you to flourish. Jesus said, I came that they may have life and have life abundantly. Think about like having full life. A full life. Not a shattered shell of life, but a full life. Jesus came that we may have that. And so we think about, we choose our future from two futures. God wants us to focus in on these two futures. And I think what John is saying here is kind of very much the same as what Moses was saying there, as he's saying that there's two roads to walk. Jesus said it this way. He said, the path is wide that leads to destruction, and there's many that go in by it. The choices that bring us death, the choices that bring us far from God, the choices that bring us, as Moses would have said, curses. And then he said, but there's a narrow way. There's few who go in by it, but this is the road that leads to life. That leads to life. It's not coincidence that he used the same word that God used when he said, I've set before you life and death. It's the same word. He's saying, this is that road. And so we talk about making these decisions. It's real simple. If you think about it, it's simple in that it's not complex. It's not easy. But it's simple. He's saying, there's a road that leads this way to death, and there's a road that leads this way to life. God has a future and a plan and a hope, and if we can walk down that road, we will find it. Every moment, every day, we're building and deciding which future we will see. Israel had this history of following God for a little while. They get Joshua in, they cross over the Jordan River, they begin to take over. And they begin to not follow God. And just as God said would happen, curses, death. And they're like, oh my gosh, we forgot. And they get back on the road to following God, and God restores them and builds them back up, and they turn again. It just this verse from Deuteronomy is basically the story of the rest of the Old Testament. As Israel follows after God and finds life and blessing to 10 generations. But then they follow after, then they decide to walk the other way. And whether it's this God or that God or this sin or that sin or whatever, it just kind of always ends the same in death and curses. And we think about this, we think, man, God is really, really cruel. Just because we're not living his way, he's hurting all these people. I think it's the opposite. I think he's really, really good, and he's given us the way to walk in the world, the way to live in the world that keeps us from the pain of the poor choices that we make. So God isn't demanding things of us, standing far away, shoulders crossed, asking us to prove our love for him and prove how devout and we can be and prove what good Christians that we are. He's saying, man, I just don't want you to walk that way because there's pain on that road. Do you ever see a friend just making horrible decisions with their life? Maybe she's with a guy that's bad for her, or he's with a girl that's bad for her, and you're just like watching and you're like, just give it up. Walk another way. Do you ever feel like just really like the bad guy in that situation? Can you imagine how God feels about us when he says things like, don't be controlled by your money. And we are. And he's like, I'm trying not to be the bad guy here, really. I have such a generous heart. I want to give to you so much stuff. But if I'm not just going to give you, I'm not just going to pour more into you if it's just going to continue to control you. Why would I send you more taskmasters? Why would I send you more slave masters? Like, it is just, he just desires so much to be generous towards us, but how? When it's bad for us. And then we look at God and we say, we don't have enough. And he's like, no, you have actually too much. But we look at him like the bad guy. He's like, you don't want to be, we're like, God, why would you keep me from this future that I want to have this future with this career and I want to be in this kind of car and I want to be with her. And God's like, no, you can't handle that. Walk my way. It's the way that leads to life. God's not ready with a curse to throw at people who are like disobeying because he wants them to suffer because they disobeyed. He's saying there's life on this road, and I hope you walk it. The truth is that none of us have been able to walk it. And in verse 17, can we go back to that 1 John 7, or 2nd, 1 John 2, 17, it says this. It says the world is fading away along with everything that people crave. So God has this future for us, plans for a future and a hope. And he wants us to live forever. Anyone who does what pleases God will live forever. That's his goal. That's what he wants for us. That sounds good to me. That sounds like a good father who wants good things for his children, who just don't always understand how the world works. We don't understand what our future could hold. We don't actually understand what brings us joy and peace. And we just have a very broken understanding. I've been able to make a pretty good mess out of my life doing what I want. I'm pretty sure your story's the same. When we follow God, it gets better because he wants good for us. And this world is fading away. I just have a think about high school. I think about how much I cared about what was happening in my high school. It was about the social ladder, all about it. I cared that I was the captain on the team. I cared that I had the right car and the right clothes and that everybody looked at me and saw the right thing. And I cared about all that so much in high school. It mattered to me. I mean, I got bad grades and that's what I was chasing. And I remember right after high school, a week after graduation, I was like, okay, none of this matters. Literally none of it mattered. What anybody thought of me for 4 years. And it mattered so much to me in that moment. And in that place, the world I was living in faded away. But there were other people in high school who didn't spend their high school chasing after all of those things that I was chasing after, the desire of the flesh, the desire of the eyes, the pride in riches. There were people who were not chasing that stuff. They were looking to their future. They were making decisions to do their homework. And they went on to college, or they went on to a trade school, or they went and joined the military, and their world didn't fade away. because they'd been building for a world that was going to last beyond that one. I think so many of us are treating our life here on planet Earth like it's high school. But it's like in no time, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride in our achievements, all of that is fading away in no time. We're going to be standing in the next world, and we're going to be looking at the ones of us who are wise enough to build for our future. It's two roads. And when I think about the two roads, I think, man, if this is so simple then, right? This is so simple. Like all we have to do is choose this road instead of that road. Done. But literally no one's ever done that. Only Jesus has ever done that. Why is this so hard? Oh, God said do this. If I just do these things, if I just walk this way, my life will be full of blessing. Because we have an enemy. Personified here in this thought about the world. John uses this idea of the world versus God, and not in the sense that like the world isn't people, but it's the systems and the things the world values, and it gives you these things, these little. It's not an all-out attack often. It's usually just a little diversion, little lust of the flesh, little lust of the eyes, what I see and I want, what I want to feel, lust of the flesh, pride in my achievements, how I want to be seen. It's just those little things that pull us off the road, and we stop living for the future God has for us so we can feel in the present these little things. And we realize very quickly, actually, that these things are fading away. But we walk after them anyways. It derails us from the future that God has for us. And as the band comes up here, I want to get ready to close this with one more thought. I lied, it's two more thoughts. It's a two-parter. Because of Jesus, because God himself is forgiving and full of grace and desires that we would walk the right way, and he has a future that he wants for us, and he has he's not intimidated, and we get it wrong, and he doesn't. When we make a good choice, we can change our trajectory. So the good news is this: wherever we find ourselves today, walking with Jesus, choosing his future for us, choosing his future for our city, choosing his future for our church, for our families. If we walk that road, one decision changes our trajectory. One decision can change our trajectory. You make another good decision, you make another good decision, all of a sudden, we're heading in a totally different direction in our life. So often we look at ourselves and the place that we're in our lives, whether it's our fault or not, whether we made the decisions that got us here. We look at where this place in our life and we're like, I guess this is just the road I'm on. I always make bad decisions. This is the marriage I've got. It's the marriage I'm going to have. This is the financial picture I'm in. It's the financial picture I'm going to be in. We look at our present and decide our present is our future. I don't have a lot of friends. I'll never have a lot of friends. Nobody wants to be here. Nobody's ever going to be here. We look at our present and we say, man, this is my future. But I want us this morning to stop and ask this question. If Jesus has my present, what would my future look like? You don't have to worry yourself about the 15 million decisions you're going to have to make between now and eternity. Just say, what if Jesus had my present? What would my future look like? What if I could give him just this moment, just this time, right now? Make one decision that walks down that road. And then the next time I have to make a decision, I make another one. and then another one, and then I might make a bad decision. But God has this really interesting way of taking even our bad decisions and using them for His good and for His glory. It says that He can turn all things for good for those who love Him. He could take our mistakes and our mess ups and the way that other people hurt us and the way we hurt other people. And if we turn to Him, if we just turn back to Him, we can start down the road again. Our futures are not dependent on how good we are at creating them. Our futures are dependent on the God who's willing to redeem our past, our present, and the mistakes we make in the future. This is a redemption story. Your life is a story of redemption to the greatest possible future for you. God has a plan for you. A plan to give you a future and a hope. Now, the good news is that your past and even your present doesn't have to be your future.